Like this if it touched your soul. It's more than a click. It's a silent hug. Comment how you think this story will end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing, but it means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. Claude may make mistakes. Always check the answers. The New York night glowed over the Chrysler Building. Limousines dropped off guests wrapped in silk and diamonds in front of the red-carpeted entrance. Adam Grant stepped out of a regular taxi. At 62, he wore a discreet, impeccable but unostentatious grey suit. The cold November air hit his face as he walked toward the entrance with his hands in his pockets. A burly security guard stopped him. "Credential?" Adam showed the golden invitation. The guard examined it with disdain. "This is for VIPs. Catering staff enters through the side." "I'm not catering." The guard scanned the QR code and the screen confirmed green. He let him pass with obvious distaste. The lobby exploded in opulence. Crystal. Chandeliers, marble staircases, hundreds of guests with champagne glasses. An orchestra played Vivaldi. Adam advanced slowly. A blonde woman in a gold dress looked him up and down. "Excuse me, are you with the service?" "No." She walked away without saying goodbye. A young executive pushed past him. "Watch it." Several women withdrew their purses when he approached. Adam smiled slightly. Invisibility had its advantages. He went to the bar and ordered whiskey. A man in an Italian suit watched him, with annoyance. "This bar is for guests. If you're looking for staff, your area is in the kitchen." "I'm a guest," Adam replied calmly. "Seriously? There should be a stricter code." The man leaned in. "A tip. You'd be more comfortable waiting your turn with the rest of the staff." Adam held his gaze in silence until the other walked away. In the center of the ballroom, under a crystal spider chandelier, were the hosts. Richard Sterling, tall, silver hair, granite jaw. Beside him, Eliza shone in deep red, diamonds sparkling, a perpetual smile. They were masters of appearance. Richard turned his head and saw him. A wrinkle appeared between his eyebrows. He said something to Eliza, who also turned. Adam saw the exact moment of their mistaken conclusion, and he waited. Eliza touched Richard's arm and pointed discreetly toward the bar. He nodded, and both began to cross the ballroom. The guests naturally parted as they passed, like the sea before Moses. Adam watched them approach. He didn't move. "Good evening," Richard greeted with a strained smile. "I don't think I've seen you at our events before. It's my first time here." "I see." Eliza examined him with sharp eyes. "And you are?" "Adam Grant." The name provoked no recognition. Richard exchanged a quick glance with Eliza. "Mr. Grant, I'm afraid there's been a confusion. This is a private gala, by invitation only." "I have an invitation." "Ah," Richard forced a smile. "Then perhaps you're from the technical team. We sometimes send courtesies to the staff working on our projects. Very kind of you to come. But the area for external collaborators is—" "I'm not on the technical team." A muscle tensed in Richard's jaw. Eliza took control with lethal softness. "Mr. Grant, allow me to be direct. Tonight we're celebrating a very important deal. Our guests are CEOs, investors, strategic partners, people of a certain level." She paused delicately. "It's nothing personal, but I think you'd be more comfortable in an environment more appropriate for you." "I understand," Adam said. "And what environment would that be?" Eliza laughed softly as if speaking to a child. "Well, everyone has their place, don't you think? Not all of us are made for these events." Richard reached out to a passing waitress and took a glass of red wine from her tray. He held it in front of Adam. "Look, just so there are no misunderstandings." His voice had chilled. "Why don't you make yourself useful and take this to table 7? It's over there, next to the column." Adam looked at the glass. Then he looked at Richard. He said nothing. "Did you not hear me?" Richard's voice rose slightly. Several nearby guests began to turn. Some took out their phones. "I think you're confused about my role here." "There's no confusion." Richard took a step forward. "You don't belong at this event. And if you're not going to cooperate, then I suggest you—" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Richard, with a sudden gesture of frustration, poured the glass of wine directly onto Adam's chest. The dark red liquid expanded across the white shirt and the jacket lapel like blood. Eliza laughed. It wasn't a nervous or accidental laugh. It was clear, deliberate, amplified by the sudden silence that had taken hold of the area. "Now you know your place," she said. The cameras captured everything. Dozens of phones pointed toward them. The circle of observers had closed. Adam remained motionless. The wine dripped from his chin. Drops fell onto the marble floor with small dry taps. His eyes locked onto Richard, then onto Eliza. There was no anger on his face, nor humiliation. There was something much more unsettling, an absolute calm. Slowly he took a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his face, then the lapel of his jacket. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic. "I understand," he finally said. He turned and walked toward the exit. The guests parted as he passed, some with uncomfortable expressions, others not, hiding their amusement. Richard and Eliza looked at each other and smiled. A nearby executive gave them approving pats on the shoulder. No one saw when Adam, already in the outer corridor, pulled out his phone. And no one heard his words. "Cancel the deal. Close all channels. Publish now." Adam was descending in the elevator when the first signs of chaos began upstairs. The LED screens, showing the Sterling Quantum Solutions logo, flickered once, twice. Then they went completely dark. The music stopped mid-note. A confused murmur ran through the ballroom. Richard frowned and signaled his chief technology officer, who was already running toward the controls. Then the screens turned on again, but now they showed something different. Official statement. The Grant Group suspends negotiations with Sterling Quantum Solutions. $800 million contract cancelled with immediate effect. The silence was total. Eliza read the words 3 times before her brain processed them. "What is this?" she whispered. Richard already had his phone to his ear. "Robert, what the hell is going on?" His voice cut through the silence like a knife. The screens changed again. Now they showed the logo of the Grant Group, a stylized G that everyone in that ballroom knew, because everyone, absolutely everyone present at that gala, knew who Adam Grant was, or should have known. An executive dropped his glass. The crystal shattered against the marble. "My God," someone murmured. "The man with the wine." "It was him," a woman said, hand to her mouth. "It was Adam Grant." Phones began ringing simultaneously. Dozens of different tones created a frantic cacophony. Guests answered with increasingly dismayed expressions. Sterling's chief financial officer ran toward Richard with a distraught face. Our main accounts are frozen. Access has been revoked." "What? How?" "Grant controlled 50% of the operating capital through subsidiaries. He just activated immediate withdrawal clauses." Eliza staggered. Richard held her arm. "He can't do that. We have contracts." "The contracts have unilateral cancellation clauses in case of loss of mutual trust," explained the legal director, who had just joined the group. "They are perfectly drafted. We can't block him." A market analyst ran across the ballroom. "The stocks, they're plummeting." On the screens, now connected to real-time stock feeds, the numbers descended vertiginously. Sterling Quantum Solutions had lost 22% of its market value in less than 10 minutes. The investors present at the gala began to leave the ballroom. They weren't walking. They were running. Richard tried to stop one of them. "Mr. Chen, wait. We can fix this." The man didn't even look at him. "You're finished, Richard." The phones kept ringing. Every call brought worse news. Deutsche Bank suspends the credit line. Singapore partners withdraw their participation. The National Securities Market Commission has opened an investigation. Eliza slumped into a chair. Her bright red dress now looked like a bloodstain. "I don't understand," she murmured. "How?" One of the younger executives, face illuminated by his mobile screen, approached with hesitant steps. "Mrs. Sterling, you should see this." He showed her the phone. Twitter was exploding. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. The video of the spilled wine had gone viral. But it wasn't just the video. There were also the photographs of Adam Grant, official images from previous galas, from meetings with heads of state, from the cover of Forbes the previous year. The invisible philanthropist, Adam Grant, the man who shuns the spotlight. The comments were brutal. "Did you just humiliate the 5th richest man in America? Sterling Quantum just committed corporate suicide in live 4K. That moment when you don't know who you're despising." Eliza vomited into a flower pot. Richard remained motionless, the phone still to his ear. listening to the dial tone of someone who would never answer. In 30 minutes his world had collapsed, and it had all started with a glass of wine. In her Upper East Side apartment, Sarah Miller, a financial journalist for the New York Times, was preparing for bed when her phone vibrated. Then it vibrated again and again. She checked the notifications. Her eyes opened wide. 3 minutes later, she was in front of her computer typing, "War of Titans, Sterling's fall over a glass of wine." By 3 in the morning, all national media carried the story on the front page. On social media, the hashtag #ChanGlassOfWine was the #1 trend in the US and entering the global top 10. Memes appeared by the dozen. Images of Richard pouring the wine with captions like, "When you destroy your company in 4K Ultra HD." GIFs of Eliza laughing, subtitled, "The sound of $800 million evaporating." Edited videos where the glass of wine turned into a nuclear bomb. But beyond the humor, there was genuine outrage. This is what's wrong with the corporate world. They judge people by their clothes, not their value. Adam Grant is known for his philanthropy. He funded children's hospitals, and this is how they treat him. How many times have we ignored someone valuable because of their appearance? In his hotel, Adam read some comments. He didn't smile. He didn't feel victorious. He only felt a profound sadness, because he knew that nothing would really change. The lesson would last a week, maybe a month. Then, everyone would go back to judging books by their covers. He turned off the phone and looked out the window at sleeping New York. He had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. The sun entered cruelly through the windows of the Sterling's penthouse. Eliza hadn't slept. Neither had Richard. The dining room table was covered with newspapers. All carried their photo on the front page. The Price of Arrogance, The Wall Street Journal, Sterling Fall from Grace, Forbes, When Contempt is Costly, Bloomberg. Business Week. Richard's phone had rung non-stop since 6 in the morning. Calls from lawyers, board members, furious investors. The most painful had been from his father, the original founder of the company. "I warned you," the old man had said with a trembling voice. "I warned you that arrogance destroys empires." Eliza was reading the comments on her tablet with trembling fingers. "They say I'm a monster." "You are," Richard murmured without looking at her. "We both are. You were the one who spilled the wine, and you laughed. The world never forgets the laughter." The doorbell rang. It was Jack Soto, their communications director, with deep circles under his eyes and 2 coffees to go. "We have to talk about damage control." "What damage control?" Richard laughed bitterly. "We lost 40% of the company's value in one night. 3 board members have resigned. The banks have closed the doors on us. We can give a press conference. Public apologies. Donation to charity in the name of... We're not going to buy forgiveness." But even as he said it, Richard knew they had no other choice. Jack opened his briefcase. "I've identified 11 public relations opportunities. First, exclusive interview with Oprah. Second, $5 million donation to..." "With what money?" Eliza interrupted. "Don't you understand? We have no liquidity." The silence fell like a heavy stone. Jack closed the briefcase slowly. "Then, what do you want me to do?" Richard got up and walked to the window. New York City stretched out below him, indifferent to his tragedy. "Get me Adam Grant's number." "We already tried. His assistants aren't answering. His lawyers are hanging up on us." "Then we'll go in person." Eliza raised her head sharply. "What?" "You heard. We'll go to his house. We'll beg for forgiveness. On our knees, if necessary." "That would be humiliating." Richard looked at her with hard eyes. "Eliza, we are already humiliated. The question is whether we survive." Adam was having breakfast on the terrace of his apartment when his assistant, Martha, appeared with a worried expression. "They've called 17 times this morning. Sterling wants to meet with you." "No. He says he'll come personally if necessary." Adam drank his coffee slowly. It was a smooth Colombian blend that reminded him of his late wife. She had always insisted on the ritual of a quiet breakfast. "Let him come if he wants. The answer will be the same." Martha hesitated. "Mr. Grant, I know that look. What are you planning to do?" Adam smiled slightly. "Tell the truth, that's all. The truth can be more destructive than any lie." "I know. That's why it's important to tell it." Martha nodded and withdrew. Adam finished his coffee and looked up at the blue New York sky. He thought of his wife, how she would have handled it, with firmness but with compassion. with justice but without cruelty. Eleanor had always been a better person than him, but Eleanor was no longer here, and some lessons needed to be taught. The black Mercedes stopped in front of the discreet building in Greenwich Village. Richard and Eliza descended with tense movements. The doorman stopped them. "Who are you looking for?" "Adam Grant. We need to talk to him. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but then you can't go up." Richard pulled out his wallet. $500 if you let us pass." The doorman didn't touch the money. "Respect is not for sale, sir. Mr. Grant taught me that." Finally, after 3 calls, Martha came down. Personally. 5 minutes, and only because he allows it. The elevator went up in silence. Eliza was visibly trembling. Richard clenched his fists. The apartment door opened. Adam was waiting for them standing, in linen pants and a white shirt. No tie, no pretense. "Come in." The apartment was normal. No $1 million art on the walls. No designer furniture, just books, family photographs, and natural light. "Mr. Grant, Richard began. "No," Adam interrupted him. "You have come to ask." "I will speak first." He sat down across from them. His grey eyes were impossible to read. "You have come to ask me to reconsider, to restore the deal, to forgive." Eliza nodded desperately. "We didn't know who you were. It was a terrible mistake. Please, give us a second chance." Adam stared at her. And if he had really been a waiter, would it have been okay then? Silence answered for her. "That's the problem," Adam continued. "You didn't lose everything that night. You lost it long before, when you decided that a person's value depends on their appearance." Richard leaned forward. "You're right, we were arrogant, cruel, but everyone deserves a second chance." "Everyone." Adam got up and walked toward the window. "Did you give a second chance to the technician you fired last month for being 5 minutes late? To the secretary who cried in the bathroom because Eliza yelled at her in front of everyone? To the small suppliers who went bankrupt because you delayed payments?" Each question was a slap. "I investigate before investing, not just numbers, people, and what I found in your company was a pattern of systematic contempt for anyone you considered inferior." "We will change," Eliza pleaded through tears. "Please." Adam returned to his seat. His voice was now softer but no less firm. "You don't rebuild a character in a week of panic. Humility is not learned when you lose everything. It's learned when you have everything and choose to treat others well anyway." He stood up. The meeting was over. "The deal is cancelled. The trust is broken. My door is closed. Mr. Grant. And one last thing." Adam looked at them with an expression they would both remember for the rest of their lives. "Walk carefully. The world is smaller than you think, and the next person you despise could be even more unforgiving than me." Martha accompanied them to the exit. In the elevator, Eliza began to cry. Richard just stared into the void. They knew they had received the final answer. There would be no second chance. The following weeks were brutal for Sterling Quantum Solutions. The board of directors voted by majority for Richard's removal as CEO. Eliza resigned from all her positions. The company was sold off in parts to competitors. Employees were absorbed by other companies or laid off. The empire that had taken 30 years to build was dismantled in 3 months. Richard and Eliza moved to a smaller apartment. They sold the penthouse, the cars, the vacation, properties. They did not fall into poverty. They still had resources, but they had fallen from the summit, and everyone knew it. The worst was not the financial loss. It was the look on people's faces, some with satisfaction, others with pity, but all with the same silent message: "You brought it on yourselves." One afternoon, Richard was at a normal coffee shop, one he would never have frequented before. The waiter who served him recognized him. "Aren't you Richard Sterling?" Richard nodded, cautiously. The young man smiled. "I worked at your company 2 years ago. You fired me for asking for a day off to go to my grandmother's funeral." Richard felt the floor open up beneath his feet. "I'm sorry. Now I own this coffee shop." The young man gestured around. "Small, but mine. And I treat my staff well." He poured the coffee with professional care. "The check is on the house. Everyone deserves a free coffee once in a while. Even you." When Richard left, tears were running down his face. 6 months after the incident, Eliza joined a volunteer organization that helped the homeless. At first, everyone was suspicious of her, the woman of the wine glass, the one who had laughed. But Eliza didn't leave. Day after day, she showed up. She served food. She listened to stories. She learned names. One night, an older woman named Martha asked her, "Why are you here?" "Guilt." Eliza thought for a long time before answering. "Yes, but also something more. I want to understand what I never saw." "And what is that?" "That every person has value regardless of anything else." Martha nodded. "That's an expensive lesson. The most expensive I've ever paid." Richard, for his part, accepted a modest position at a small technology consulting firm, not as a director, as an analyst. His boss was a 35-year-old man who called him by his first name, not Mr. Sterling. At first it was humiliating. Then it was liberating. For the first time in decades, Richard was doing real work, not managing. Working. And he discovered he was good at it. One afternoon his boss invited him for a beer after work. "You know why I hired you?" he asked. "No, because I read your story. And I thought, a man who has fallen so low and keeps going, that man has learned something." Richard drank his beer, a cheap brand he wouldn't have touched before. "I'm still learning." "Good, because no one ever finishes learning." A year after the incident, Adam attended the inauguration of a children's hospital that his foundation had funded. As he toured the facilities, a nurse stopped him. "Mr. Grant, there's someone who wants to meet you." In one of the waiting rooms, Eliza was sitting with a child in her lap. She was reading a story in a soft voice. When she saw Adam, she stood up slowly. "Mr. Grant." Adam nodded. "Mrs. Sterling, I didn't expect to see you here. I'm a volunteer, 2 days a week." They looked at each other in silence. The weight of that terrible day floated between them. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Eliza finally said. "I just wanted you to know that your lesson was heard." Adam observed her hands. She no longer wore diamonds. Her nails were short, practical. "How is Richard?" "Working, humbly. Happy, I think, for the first time in years." The child tugged at Eliza's sleeve. "Finish the story?" She smiled. "In a moment, honey." Adam felt something loosen in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was recognition of a real change. "Volunteering is good," he said. "But if you ever need real work, my foundation is always looking for committed people." Eliza looked at him with moist eyes. "Are you serious?" "I don't make offers I can't keep." "Then, thank you. But I think we need to make our own way first. Earn it." Adam nodded. It was the right answer. "When you're ready, the door is open." He turned to leave, but Eliza called him back. "Mr. Grant, that night, I'm sorry about the wine. But most of all, I'm sorry about the laughter. That was my real crime." "I know," Adam replied. "And the fact that you understand it now means that not all is lost." 2 years after the incident, Sarah Miller published a follow-up article in the New York Times. "After the Glass, What We Learned and What We Forgot." 2 years have passed since the night that shook the American corporate world. The image of Richard Sterling spilling wine on Adam Grant became a symbol of business arrogance. But what happened next? Richard Sterling now works as an independent consultant. Eliza. Sterling coordinates volunteer programs. Both live simple lives far from the spotlight. Sterling Quantum Solutions was absorbed by competitors. Some employees lost jobs. Others found better opportunities. Adam Grant never gave interviews about the incident. His foundation continued its silent work. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether the Sterlings deserved their fall. The question is, have we learned anything? Because 2 years later, we continue to judge books by their covers. We continue to measure value by appearances. We continue to build hierarchies based on superficialities. The glass of wine was a brutal reminder. But reminders only work if we change. Have we? The article generated national debate. Some said it was too soft on the Sterlings, others that it was too harsh, but everyone read it, and at least some reflected. 3 years after the incident, in a modest coffee shop in the Lower East Side neighborhood, 2 men sat across from each other at a table by the window. The place smelled of freshly ground coffee and toasted bread. The walls were decorated with black and white photographs of a New York that no longer existed. Adam had visibly aged. His hair was now completely white, and deep lines marked his face like maps of silent battles. But his grey eyes maintained the same penetrating clarity, the same ability to see through the masks people wore. Richard had fewer wrinkles than before, something that seemed paradoxical considering all he had lost. But it was as if the weight of arrogance had been heavier than the weight of humility. He dressed simply. Dark jeans, cotton shirt, a light jacket, nothing that screamed his former status. The waiter, a young man with tattoos on his arms, served them 2 lattes and discreetly withdrew. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Richard began, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "I know you had no obligation." "I was curious," Adam replied honestly. "Your assistant mentioned it was important." "It is, for me at least." Richard took a sip of coffee, organizing his thoughts. "I wanted you to know that Eliza and we're fine. Not rich, not powerful, but fine. Happy even. And that's something I never thought I'd say after losing everything." Adam observed the other man's face, looking for signs of falsity. He found none. "I'm glad to hear that. I work for a small consulting firm. Eliza coordinates volunteer work. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens." Richard smiled. "Slightly. My former partners wouldn't recognize me on the subway." "You take the subway?" "Every day. F-line. It's surprisingly meditative once you get used to it." A comfortable silence settled between them. Outside, New York lived its routine. Mothers pushing strollers, the elderly walking slowly, tourists consulting maps on their phones. "And I wanted to thank you," Richard continued, his voice dropping a tone. Adam raised an eyebrow. "For destroying your company? For teaching us what no one else could, what no one else dared?" Richard stared at his cup. "For years, I measured success in bank zeros, in corporate titles, in how many people stood up when I entered a room. Now I measure it in whether I can sleep soundly at night, in whether the people I meet appreciate me for who I am, not for what I have." "And can you sleep soundly?" "Yes, finally." Richard looked up. "The first few months were hell. I won't lie. I would wake up at 3 in the morning with panic attacks." Eliza cried. "Every time we passed our old building, we lost friends or what we thought were friends. We discovered that most of our social life was built on mutual usefulness, not genuine affection." Adam nodded. He knew that phenomenon well. "But gradually," Richard continued, "something changed. We started meeting real people. The neighbor who taught us how to fix a leak, the market lady who saves the best fruits for us, the newsstand guy who asks how our day was and genuinely wants to know." He paused. "It sounds corny, I know. It doesn't sound corny, it sounds human." "Exactly, human. That's the word." For decades, Eliza and I lived in a bubble where everything was transactional, strategic, calculated. We never had conversations simply for the pleasure of conversing. We never did favors without expecting something in return. We didn't even realize we were alone until we lost everything else. Adam drank his coffee slowly, letting Richard continue at his own pace. "You know what's ironic?" Richard asked. "That day at that gala, I had everything and I had nothing. I had 800 million in contracts, but I had no peace. I had the superficial respect of hundreds of people, but I didn't have a single true friend. Now I have little in material terms, but I have something real, something that cannot be taken away with a corporate decision or a change in the market." "Wealth is strange that way," Adam observed. "It can make you feel powerful while emptying you inside. It's like eating air. It fills you momentarily, but it never nourishes." "Exactly." Richard leaned forward. "And I wanted to ask you something, if you don't mind. Were you ever tempted to publicly humiliate me, to completely destroy me beyond the business realm? You had the power to do it. You could have made me a social pariah, closed every door on me." Adam thought carefully before answering. "Every day of the first week," he admitted. "I was furious. Not so much about the wine, which was simply ridiculous, but about what it represented, about the casualness with which you assumed my value as a human being was inferior to yours, about the laughter, especially about the laughter." Richard visibly flinched at the mention of the laughter. "But my wife used to say that revenge is sugar for the ego and poison for the soul," Adam continued, "and she was right. Cancelling the contract was justice. Anything beyond that would have been cruelty, and cruelty doesn't correct anything. It only perpetuates the cycle. She was wise. She was." A shadow of pain crossed Adam's face. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. And every day since, I try to make decisions she would approve of. I don't always succeed, but I try. I'm sorry. I didn't know. There's no reason you should have. I kept her illness private. She didn't want to be the millionaire's wife tragically dying. She wanted dignity, until the end. They remained silent for a long moment, each lost in his own thoughts. The waiter approached to offer more coffee. Both accepted. "May I ask you something now?" Adam said when the waiter withdrew. "Of course. What was the specific moment when you realized you had truly changed? Not the moment you decided to change, but the moment you knew you were already different." Richard reflected deeply. "It was about a year ago. I was at the supermarket, doing the weekly shopping, something I had never done in my previous life, of course, and there was an older woman in front of me in the checkout line. When her turn came, she discovered she didn't have enough money. She started taking products out of her bag, embarrassed, deciding what to put back. Adam listened attentively, and without thinking, I paid the difference. It was only $12, but she looked at me as if I had given her the world. She thanked me 3 times with tears in her eyes, and as I walked out of the supermarket, I realized I felt more satisfaction from those $12 than from any multi-million-dollar contract I had. Signed, because it was real," Adam said softly. "Because it was real," Richard repeated. There was no photograph for the newspaper, no tax deduction, no public relations strategy, just a human moment between 2 people, and I realized that throughout my entire previous life, I had never experienced anything like that. Everything had an angle, a secondary purpose. "And Eliza? How has her transformation been?" Richard smiled with genuine affection. "Deeper than mine, I think. She works with the homeless now. Not as an occasional volunteer who shows up for the photo. She is there 4 days a week, from 8 in the morning to 6 in the evening. She knows their names, their stories, their dreams. There's a man named Joe whom she helped find work. Now he calls her his angel." He paused. "The woman who laughed when you were humiliated and the woman who hugs Joe every morning, they are not the same person." "People can change," Adam observed. "It's rare, and it's difficult, but it's possible. The problem is that most people don't want to do the work. They prefer to change their appearance of change without actually changing. We had to. We had no other choice. When you lose everything, when everyone abandons you, when your name becomes synonymous with arrogance and failure, you either change or you destroy yourself." Richard looked him directly in the eyes. "Did you know that when you made your decision, that you were giving us a chance to be reborn?" Adam considered the question carefully. "No, honestly, no. At that moment, I just wanted there to be consequences. I was tired of seeing how powerful people could behave atrociously without any real repercussions. But if your rebirth was a side effect, I'm glad. Would you ever forgive us?" The question hung in the air between them. "Richard," Adam finally said, "forgiveness doesn't work like a switch that turns on or off. It's not transactional. You can't earn it by meeting certain requirements." He paused. "But I can tell you that when I see you now, I don't see the man who poured wine on me. I see someone who has done the work of looking in the mirror and hasn't looked away. That means more than you can imagine." Adam pointed toward the window, where an older man was feeding pigeons in the square. "See that man? Probably no one on this street knows his name. No one takes pictures with him, but maybe he is kind to his neighbors. Maybe he helps his grandson with his homework. Maybe he has a life full of small acts of kindness that will never appear in any headline." He looked back at Richard. "That's the kind of life worth living. Not the one that impresses strangers, but the one that makes you feel at peace when you rest your head on the pillow. I'm working to get there. I know. And the fact that you are working, that you are not simply pretending or waiting for the media storm to pass, that says something." Richard got up to leave. They had been talking for almost 2 hours. He extended his hand. Adam shook it firmly. "Thank you for the coffee," Richard said, "and for the conversation, and for everything. Take care of Eliza. Take care of each other." "We will." As Richard left the coffee shop, Adam remained seated, watching him disappear into the street crowd. They weren't friends. They probably never would be. The past was too big for that. But there was mutual respect and recognition of shared humanity. And in a world that often lacked both, that was enough. 5 years. After the incident, Adam Grant gave his first and only extensive interview about that night that had shaken the American corporate world. The program was a 3-part documentary on business ethics, produced by an international network. The director was Mark Mendoza, a renowned documentarian who had won awards for his work on economic inequality. The interview took place in Adam's study, a room filled with books reaching up to the ceiling. Natural light entered through wide windows, illuminating the family photographs that covered the walls. There was no ostentation, no corporate trophies, just a life lived and remembered fondly. Adam was now 68 years old. Time had been gentle with him in some ways and hard in others. He moved more slowly, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. Mark, the interviewer, was a man in his 40s with a calm presence that invited trust. He had spent 3 months researching before the interview, speaking with hundreds of people who knew Adam. Mr. Grant, Mark began after the cameras started rolling. 5 years have passed since the night of the incident. In that time, the story has been told and retold millions of times, but never in your own words. Why speak now? Adam adjusted his reading glasses, a gesture he had developed when he needed time to think. Because I believe enough time has passed for us to reflect clearly. When something goes viral, it becomes a myth. Details are distorted, motivations are simplified, people become characters. I thought it was time to bring some human context. Let's start at the beginning. You received an invitation to that gala, a formal, legitimate invitation. Why did you choose to attend, knowing that you probably wouldn't be recognized? Precisely because of that. Adam smiled slightly. I've spent decades avoiding public attention, not out of performative humility, but because I genuinely prefer privacy. But that means my face is not known to the general public. I'm recognized in certain business circles, but outside of those, you're invisible. Exactly. And I wanted to see how Sterling Quantum Solutions operated when they thought no one important was watching. Companies show their true character in how they treat the people they think don't matter. Mark leaned forward. So it was a deliberate test. Not exactly. Adam paused. I went with the intention of observing before signing an $800 million contract. Any sensible investor does their due diligence. But I didn't anticipate being mistaken for service staff. That was revealing. Tell me about that moment, when Richard Sterling poured the wine on you. Silence filled the room. Adam looked toward the window, where the trees swayed gently in the spring breeze. Have you ever felt that strange clarity that comes with public humiliation? Everything becomes very sharp. I could hear every laugh, see every phone recording, feel the cold wine soaking my shirt. And in that moment, I had a choice. What kind of choice? I could reveal who I was immediately, turn their humiliation toward me into my humiliation toward them. It would have been satisfying. Or I could simply leave, take the high road. Adam looked back at Mark. I chose a third option, to leave with dignity but to ensure there were consequences. Consequences that destroyed their company. Consequences that revealed the fragility of their empire. Adam leaned forward with intensity. Here's what many people don't understand. I didn't destroy Sterling Quantum Solutions. They were already destroyed. They built on sand, on appearances, on the assumption that they could treat people badly without repercussions. I simply withdrew my support, and everything collapsed because there was nothing real holding it up. That's quite philosophical. It's reality. I've seen this repeated dozens of times in my career, companies that look solid from the outside but are rotten at the core, and always, it's for the same reason. Leadership that confuses power with entitlement. Mark consulted his notes. I spoke with several former Sterling employees. They described a toxic work environment, rampant favoritism, whimsical firings, systematic disrespect for anyone not at the executive level. Did you know this before the gala? I had indications. My research team had compiled reports. But there's a difference between reading about a behavior and experiencing it personally. That night confirmed everything I had suspected. Do you think the Sterlings learned their lesson? Adam remained silent for a long moment. I think they were forced to learn. That's not the same as choosing to learn. Real transformation comes from within, from a genuine desire to be better. When it is imposed by external circumstances, there is always the question of whether it is authentic or simply an adaptation to the new reality. You sound skeptical. I am realistic. Adam took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. I've lived long enough to know that people rarely change fundamentally. They can modify behaviors, learn new patterns, develop better self-control. But the basic character, that is much harder to transform. And yet, I've heard that you met with Richard Sterling 2 years ago. That's right. What motivated you to accept that meeting? Curiosity, and perhaps a little hope. It's easy to be cynical. It's harder to give someone the opportunity to prove they've changed. And had he? Had he changed? Adam put his glasses back on. He seemed different, more humble, more reflective. But 2 hours in a coffee shop don't tell me who someone really is. Character is revealed in thousands of small moments when no one is watching. Not in a carefully prepared conversation. Mark changed the angle. There have been critics who say your response was disproportionate, that $800 million and the collapse of a company is too high a price for a moment of misconduct. Misconduct? Adam laughed without humor. That's an interesting way to describe it, but let's put that aside. The real question is, what is the appropriate price for a systematic pattern of disrespect, for creating an environment where people are valued solely for their utility, for building a toxic corporate culture that affected hundreds of employees? So it wasn't about the wine. The wine was simply the symbol, the visible catalyst, but the problem was much deeper. Adam got up and walked toward the window. And here's what critics don't understand. I didn't make that decision for personal revenge. I made it because every dollar I invest is a vote on what kind of world I want to see. Those 800 million would have strengthened a business model that treats people as disposable. Why would I do that? But hundreds of employees lost their jobs when the company collapsed. True, and that weighs on me. Adam returned to his chair. But it's also true that many of those employees found better positions in companies with better culture. I receive occasional emails from former Sterling employees thanking me for forcing a change they needed but would never have sought on their own. Does that make you feel better about the situation? No, because true change shouldn't require destruction, but we live in an imperfect world where sometimes the only way to create space for something new is to tear down the old. Mark paused, allowing silence to settle. If you could, give one piece of advice to young entrepreneurs, to the next generation of leaders, what would it be? Adam looked directly at the camera. I would tell them that every person they encounter, regardless of their position or appearance, is a test of their character, and that eventually the universe collects its debts, not always dramatically as in my case. Sometimes it's more subtle. Talented employees who leave, opportunities that are lost because no one wants to work with you, a reputation that slowly erodes until one day you realize you are alone. Is that a threat? No, it's an observation based on 68 years of life and 45 years in business. I have seen empires built on arrogance collapse again and again, not because someone tears them down, although sometimes that happens, but because they were built on sand, on the illusion that power exempts you from the basic rules of human decency. And what is a solid foundation to build on? Adam took his time before answering. Genuine respect for all people. Humility to recognize that success always includes a measure of luck and circumstance. The understanding that we are all fundamentally the same, just with different opportunities. And the conviction that how you treat people when there is nothing to gain from them, that is who you really are. Do you forgive the Sterlings? The question hung in the air. Adam looked toward a photograph on the wall, him and his wife on their 30th anniversary, smiling under a cherry blossom tree. Forgiveness is not mine to give or withhold, not in the sense people usually understand it. They owe me nothing personally. I was fine. I have resources. I have support. I have a life that continues without them. He paused. The forgiveness they need is from all the people they treated badly over the years, from the employees they humiliated, from the suppliers they squeezed, from everyone they considered inferior simply because they could. That is a much harder forgiveness to obtain because it is fragmented among hundreds of people. But in personal terms, is there animosity? No. I let go of any anger a long time ago. Anger is exhausting, and I no longer have the energy to waste on it. Adam smiled sadly. But there is no reconciliation in the traditional sense either. I didn't hold up a mirror to them so we could be friends afterwards. I did it because I believed it was necessary. And having done that, my work is complete. What they do with that experience is their responsibility, not mine. One last question, Mr. Grant. When you look back at this whole situation 5 years later, is there anything you would change? Adam remained silent for a long minute. He took off his glasses and held them in his hands, turning them slowly. I wish it had never been necessary. I wish I lived in a world where people treat other people well, simply because it's the right thing to do, not because they fear consequences. I wish empathy were natural, not something that has to be taught through hard lessons. He looked up. But we don't live in that world. And given the world we live in, no, I wouldn't change anything. The interview ended there. When the cameras turned off, Mark extended his hand. Thank you for your time, Mr. Grant, and for your honesty. Thank you for asking the right questions. As the production team packed up their equipment, Adam returned to the window. New York stretched out before him, millions of lives unfolding. Simultaneously, each with its own struggles and triumphs. He wondered how many other glasses of wine were being spilled at that moment, literally or metaphorically. How many people were being judged by their appearance. How many opportunities were being lost because someone assumed they knew the value of another based on superficialities. The interview would air in 2 months. It would generate conversations, debates, perhaps even some change. But Adam knew that real change, lasting change, would not come from an interview or a viral incident. It would come from 1,000 small daily decisions made by millions of people to treat the next human being with dignity. And that, finally, was out of his control. All he could do was continue living by his own principles and hope that some others chose to do the same. 10 years after the incident, the Grant Foundation was holding its annual gala in the same Chrysler building where it had all begun. It was a deliberate, almost poetic choice. Adam was now 72 years old. He walked with the aid of a dark wood cane with a silver handle, a gift from his grandchildren. His hair was completely white, but his eyes maintained that penetrating clarity that had always been his trademark. This year's gala celebrated the scholarship program that had provided educational support to over 1,000 low-income young people over the last decade. Many of them were present, now graduates, some starting their own businesses, others in leadership roles in established companies. The ballroom was decorated with simple elegance, none of the ostentation that had characterized that event 10 years ago. Just simple flowers, warm lights, and photographs of the program's beneficiaries covering the walls. Adam arrived early, as was his custom. He liked to observe how the event took shape, how people arrived and interacted. Some things never changed. Among the volunteers coordinating the reception, he recognized 2 familiar faces: Richard and Eliza Sterling. They had been working with the foundation for the last 3 years, first as occasional volunteers, then with greater commitment. Now they coordinated the mentorship program that connected established entrepreneurs with young founders. When they saw him approach, they instinctively straightened up. Some gestures, some respects, remained deeply ingrained. "Mr. Grant," Richard greeted with genuine warmth. "We didn't know you would arrive so early. I like to see how things come together," Adam replied. "The details reveal a lot." Eliza, now with grey hairs she didn't try to hide, and expression lines that spoke of genuine smiles, pointed toward a group of young people reviewing their final presentations. "These kids have incredible talent, Mr. Grant. They just needed a chance, a real chance where someone saw their potential instead of their apparent limitations. Like everyone," Adam said simply, "as it has always been." The 3 sat down at a side table to watch the final preparations. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of silence that is only possible between people who have shared a complex history. 10 years, Richard murmured, observing the ballroom. 10 years since that night. A complete life, Eliza added, or the end of one life and the beginning of another. Adam nodded slowly. "You know, when we planned this gala here, some of my team thought it was unnecessarily provocative, returning to the same place." "And why did you do it?" Richard asked. "Because places have no power over us. People do. And I wanted to show that this ballroom can host something better than arrogance and superficiality. It can host hope." A young man of about 23 nervously approached. He wore a suit that was clearly not his, probably borrowed, but carried it with dignity. "Mr. Grant, I'm Michael Torres. I wanted to thank you personally before the event started." Adam stood up with effort, leaning on his cane. "Michael, your agricultural connectivity application. I've been following it." "Impressive." The young man blushed. "It wouldn't exist without your scholarship. My family, we work in the fields. No one thought I could." His voice broke. "No one saw me until you did." Adam placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. "I didn't see you first. Your talent was always there. I just gave you the tools to show it." The work was yours. When Michael walked away, Eliza had tears in her eyes. "Do you see that?" she said. "That's the difference. 10 years ago I would have looked at that boy and only seen his borrowed suit. Now I see his potential. We can all change the way we look," Adam observed. "The question is whether we are willing to make the effort." Richard leaned forward. "Mr. Grant, there's something I've always wanted to ask you. That night when you left, did you feel victory? Satisfaction?" Adam shook his head slowly. "I felt sadness, a deep sadness, because in a just world, that lesson would never have been necessary." The ballroom began to fill. Former scholars, now successful professionals mingling with current students. There were entrepreneurs, academics, artists, all united by a common story of having been seen when others ignored them. The foundation's director, a brilliant woman named Patricia, stepped onto the small stage. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 10th Annual Grant Foundation Gala. Tonight we celebrate not just academic or professional achievements, but something more fundamental: human dignity." Applause filled the room. Our founder, Adam Grant, says something that has become the unofficial motto of our work. Talent is distributed equally. Opportunity is not. Our goal is to close that gap. Adam listened from his table, uncomfortable as always with the attention, but proud of the work. Patricia continued, "This year we are awarding 120 new scholarships. But beyond the numbers, we have created a community where a person's value is not measured by their zip code or their family name, but by their character and potential." More applause. "And now, I'd like to invite our founder to say a few words." Adam rose slowly, leaning on his cane. The path to the stage seemed longer than ever. Richard instinctively stood up to help him, but Adam shook his head gently. Some paths must be walked alone. When he reached the microphone, he observed the faces looking at him. Young people full of hope. Adults who remembered being those young. People. Volunteers committed to making a difference. "I'm not good with speeches," he began, his voice still strong despite the years. "I prefer actions to words. But tonight in this place I feel that some words are necessary." He paused, organizing his thoughts. 10 years ago, something happened in this very ballroom, something many of you know about. I would like to think we learned some lessons that night, but lessons are only valuable if we live them, if we internalize them, if we turn them into daily actions. He looked directly at Richard and Eliza. "I have seen people change. It is not common and it is not easy, but it is possible. And when it happens, when someone genuinely transforms their way of seeing the world and their place in it, that is beautiful." But more important than any individual story is the question we must all ask ourselves every day. Who am I ignoring? Who am I underestimating? What potential am I letting pass because my eyes only see surfaces? The silence in the ballroom was absolute. "The young man who just thanked me, Michael Torres, has extraordinary talent that is changing the lives of farmers across America. 5 years ago, someone else looked at him and only saw a boy from the countryside in simple clothes. That person lost the opportunity to be part of something important. That is their loss." Adam leaned more heavily on his cane. "I don't ask you to be saints. I don't ask for perfection. I only ask that in your next interaction with a stranger, especially with someone who seems to have no power or influence, you pause for a second, breathe, and remember that you are facing another human being with dreams, fears, talents, and dignity. That's all. It's not complicated, but it is everything." He stepped down from the stage to thunderous applause. Tears were running freely down many faces. Hours later, as the event ended and guests dispersed, Adam remained seated at his table. Richard and Eliza approached him one last time. "May I say something?" Eliza asked. Adam nodded. "That night, 10 years ago, you poured truth onto us in the same way Richard poured wine onto you. And it hurt. God, how it hurt. But it was the truth we needed to hear." She paused. "I can never thank you enough for not looking away from us, even when we deserved to be ignored." "I didn't look away," Adam corrected softly. "You did the work of changing. That was always your path, not mine." Richard extended his hand. Adam shook it, but then the younger man did something unexpected. He hugged Adam. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." When they separated, Adam saw something in Richard's eyes that he hadn't seen 10 years ago. genuine peace. "Go," he said. "You have a life to live, and for the first time I think you really know how to live it." As he watched them walk away hand in hand like any ordinary couple, Adam felt something close. A circle completed. Patricia approached with her tablet. "Tonight's donations exceeded all expectations. We can fund 200 scholarships next year." "Good," Adam said. 200 lives changed, 200 opportunities created. "Are you tired? Should I take you home?" "In a moment. I want to stay a little longer." When he was finally alone in the empty ballroom, Adam slowly walked toward the exact spot where Richard had spilled the wine a decade earlier. The marble floor gleamed clean, without any mark of that moment, but the memory remained, and with it, the lesson. He took out his phone and typed a message to his daughter. "I'm fine, successful night." Michael presented his project. "The future is bright." Then he added, "Your mother would be proud." He turned off the lights as he left. The Chrysler Building fell silent, guarding its stories, the old and the new, the painful and the hopeful. In the taxi ride home, Adam looked out the window at sleeping New York. He thought of all the glasses of wine that would never be spilled, because someone, somewhere, chose empathy over arrogance. He thought of Michael and the other 119 scholars this year. He thought of Richard and Eliza, rebuilding their lives with genuine humility. And he thought of his wife, how she always believed that people could be better if given the chance. Maybe she was right. Perhaps the world could change one person at a time, one choice at a time. It wasn't a dramatic revolution. It was something quieter, slower, but perhaps more lasting. When he arrived at his apartment, he made himself a tea and sat by the window. The city lights flickered like terrestrial stars. He had lived 72 years. He had built companies, created jobs, generated wealth. But his true legacy was in the lessons taught and learned, in the lives touched by kindness instead of cruelty, in the understanding that every human being deserves dignity. Adam closed his eyes, feeling the satisfying weight of a life well lived. And in the stillness of the New York night, a simple truth resonated. A person's value is never found in their appearance, their clothes, or their bank account. It is found in how they treat others when they have nothing to gain. That was the lesson of the glass of wine. And 10 years later, it remained as relevant as ever. Because some truths are eternal, and because the world, though slowly, can change when enough people choose to see the humanity in everyone. Adam smiled in the darkness. His work was done. The rest depended on others. And for the first time in years, he felt completely at peace.